So, who knows what the next fruit of the Spirit is? Gentleness. Good, you guys pay attention to what he was talking. That's a good start. Okay, so I'm doing the fruit of the Spirit, gentleness. The Greek word for gentleness it's kind of sounding weird. It's prautes, and it describes the quality of not being overly impressed by a sense of self-importance. It's kind of like a gentle friendliness or a meekness. And see, this word indicates an obedience to God and His will with unfavoring faith and enduring patience. And it's often in the face of opposition. Now, this is a weird analogy, but I'm going to take an elephant for a second. You see, this elephant is this massive creature, and you know it has a trunk, right? Obviously, it has a trunk. The elephant's trunk is an example of this gentleness and the strength because the trunk is massive. It has precise control, and it has 40,000 individual muscles. It's strong enough to rip branches from its trees by itself, but it's sensitive enough to pick up a single blade of grass. So, what I'm trying to say is, the gentleness that is described in this passage I'm about to share with you guys, it is called godly gentleness. It's just the opposite of weakness because it is God's power put into action with love. So how can we become this gentle? Or in another word that people that's in the Bible is called meekness. Let's take a look. If you guys could open up to John 13, 2 through 5. John 13, 2 through 5. So it was time for supper, and the devil had already prompted Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to bring him Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had given him authority over everything, and that he had come from God and would return to God. So he got up from the table, took off his robe, wrapped a towel around his waist, and poured water into a basin. Then he began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel he had around us. Now, picture this. Jesus, the Almighty Creator of the universe, washing dirty feet. Why was he doing this? What did he want to teach to his followers? Even though God himself, he was God himself in flesh, he was not too proud to be a servant. He was willing to serve them with a humble heart. You see, if Jesus is willing to serve, then we must also be servants. Willing to serve in any way that glorifies God with a humble heart. And that's that true godly gentleness, the opposite of weakness, because you're putting God's power into action with love. I also have another passage that helps explain this godly gentleness. So if you could open up to John 8, 5 through 11. I'll read that real quick. Well, before I actually give a background, at this point, there is a woman who was with the Pharisees and Jesus, and she has been caught in adultery. So that's the background. So verse 5 says, "Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say?" This they said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground, and as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at him." And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus then said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more." You see, God already knew. Jesus, he already knew what the woman was committed. He already knew all the bad stuff. And he had this power. He could have condemned her. He could have yelled at her. He could have scolded her. But you know what he did? He tells her, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on sin more." You see, gentleness is a powerful thing. He gives us this gentleness to show the power of love without words. We can be gentle ourselves by being polite to others and thinking of others before ourselves. You know, we can help others when they need something. We can cut them some slack. Listen instead of maybe talking, like the the slow to speak and quick to hear. And we can also learn from other people. You see, Jesus showed us what gentleness looked like in these passages, and it's our job to follow his example. Another word that you guys may know from gentleness is also called meekness. They're almost synonyms, but they're not exactly the same. You see, meekness, they can kind of confuse the two. Because gentleness is mostly with your actions. Like being gentle, it's like an action. But meekness, it refers to an attitude, a state of mind, as well as actions. Meekness produces gentleness. And this explains why, in a second, Matthew 5:5 talks about meekness being one of the Beatitudes. Blessed are those who are meek, for they shall inherit the earth. We are to be gentle. We're supposed to be gentle, and in doing so, we are to be meek as well. We are to be meek or yielded and teachable, first of all, in our relationship with God. And secondly, along with that, we can be meek or gentle together in our relationships with people. To become this kind of person, God must train us. God must train us, and he must help us, and we must allow him and ask him to help us. So, what I'm trying to say is, when we talk to God, and when we ask him to help us with this stuff and help us to train us, you see, he does something really cool. We all have the Holy Spirit living inside of us, right? If we all accepted God, we asked him, we all have the Holy Spirit inside of us. You see, what God does is he transforms us, and he begins to give us the fruits of the Spirit. He begins to give us love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. God can train us, but we have to allow it. So we can get that godly gentleness of putting God's power into action with love. Also, I forgot to talk about this, but consider God for a second. He's all powerful. He knows everything. He can do anything. But yet, with that power, he never misuses it. You see, he's like the perfect father who never overreacts. He never mistreats his children. He always does what's best for us, and that's really cool. Because that would be something that I would not only want me to act like, or other people to act like, to be able to realize that gentleness, it comes from the fact that you have the power, you have all this stuff, but you're putting it into action with love, and you're following what he wants you to do. So, in closing, gentleness, it comes from God. Like us ourselves, like we're not perfect. We can't achieve it on our own. We can't do all this stuff, and God is the one who can help us supply us with his gentleness. And it's really cool what he does, because when you ask him, like, he gives it to you, and it may not be perfect, but it's really cool to see what he does, and he really just transforms you, and he really changes you. So before we go into small groups, and I have some questions. I have some questions after, but I would just like to pray really quick, just to thank God for what he's